Thank you, everyone. We are now recording and we're going live here. I'm going into full presentation mode. Thank you all for joining us today for Fundraising Strategy for Programs and Telling the Impact Story. This is presented by myself, Morgan BERMAN at MilkCrate, and Sean from Cause Inspired Media. So again, we've already kind of gone over this, introducing yourselves in the chat. If you haven't done so already, please feel free to do that. We'd love to hear from you and know who you are. And just again, some basic intro or logistics. We're going to post questions in the chat during the presentation. We'll have more time for questions at the end, and we can just kind of go off mute and talk to each other. We want this to be as interactive as possible. And a reminder that we are recording. The agenda for today, we've already done the first part, and then we're going to hear from Sean for about 20 minutes, and then myself for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have a nice chunk of time to kind of discuss everything we went over, answer questions, and talk about any next steps that you all might have for us or we might have for you about learning more and getting more connected to each other afterwards. Just a bit about me. So I am the founder and CEO of MilkCrate. We are a 7-year-old mission-driven tech company based in Philadelphia. I got my start working in the nonprofit world, and now I run a tech company that serves nonprofits, and I'm still very involved as a nonprofit board member with several organizations. In my free time, when I can leave the house, back when that was a thing, I trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I'm really excited to get back to that at some point in the future. And in the meanwhile, I have a kitten to keep me busy.
Awesome. I am Sean KERR. About 5 years ago, started Cause Inspired Media with a clear focus of working with nonprofits. We saw a lot of organizations out there not taking advantage of the tools available and often being taken advantage of when they were. So we had a clear vision on dealing with that and growing with the nonprofits that we serve. I can say that I'm not nearly as interesting as Morgan. I don't do jiu-jitsu or any of that. But I'm really devoted to nonprofits. I got my background in political theory, and I take that as a different approach to digital marketing, understanding the personas in a little bit different way, and trying to mentor both my team as well as working with nonprofits to help them get to that next level. If we want to go to the next slide, today we're going to be talking. My portion of this, we sort of divided this to thinking about how do we find our audience, and then how do we engage with them. I'm going to be talking about how do we find them, how do we reach them, how do we bring them in, and Morgan's going to be addressing that latter half of how to actually engage them. So looking at this, we have digital marketing as the move that everybody's been making, right? We're shying away from print advertising, less direct mailing. Not that print is dead or print is dying, but it is different. It has a narrower use. And we need to have a more modern approach and a more modern thought process to approaching this. And digital marketing can work with nonprofits in a range of options, whether we're trying to reach them in the first place, we're trying to engage people that we've reached in some way already, but also has this major opportunity that we've lacked in the past of measuring what we're doing, measuring our impact, measuring who we're reaching, how they're responding, and it also gives us the ability to respond quickly. In the past, we may take weeks to respond to an ongoing crisis, whereas right now, one day to the next, we can have very different messages, different audiences, all of that in the mix. So within the whole digital marketing ecosystem, we have lots of options and lots of places we can apply our time and effort. One place I'd like to talk to you about specifically is the Google Ad Grant. And if we go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about, and you can go ahead, it has a couple movements on this, why we use Grant and search specifically. And it's because there are billions of searches, right? Do we want to appeal to every one of those billions of searches? No. But the growth in this section is undeniable. 23% since 2016. I think that data is actually from this past year, so it's growing even more. And it's where people are turning to get answers. And there's one specific aspect of this that I think is really, really important, and it's where I've devoted an entire slide to, and it's our next one. is the power of intent. With digital marketing and search and the grant as a specific aspect of that, we have the power to get in front of someone's intent. We get to answer their question instead of trying to create a question. We have the power to be there in the moment they need us. And that's really important, I think, in the nonprofit world and the nonprofit sector specifically. If you're a for-profit institution and you're trying to provide a service, obviously it fits there too. But with nonprofits, many of our constituents need our service now, or they, on the donor side, they see a problem and they have the intent to try to fix that problem. They want to donate, they want to volunteer, they want to do something. You can respond to that intent very effectively and then quickly. Now, before we move on, I want to ask a question. This is for first question of for some interaction. Where do you guys spend more time and effort and money on making sure your website shows in search or on your social media? You guys can chime in. I think this is always an interesting question whenever I ask this to see the different results. There's some data that's going to address this in our next slide. Anybody want to chime in? Nobody? Okay, we can go ahead and move on without your answers. We're a quiet group today. Okay, if we want to go to our next slide, I can answer where you should be spending it. And it's because probably social media from KERR. Okay. People are 7 times more likely to visit a nonprofit site from search than social. We have 40, this is a standard, an average of the nonprofit analytic data, that 47% of site visits come from search, compared to less than 7 from social media. Now, those 7 are incredibly valuable. I'm not telling you to ignore your social media, but think about your website. Think about where you're sending them. Think about how it's showing up, and think about how you can make a bigger impact with those users. And one of the biggest ways, as I mentioned before, is this Google ad grant. If we go to the next slide, I have some stats here that are really interesting about this program. If you're not familiar with it, Google gives $10,000 a month in advertising credit to nonprofits, as long as you're a 501c3 or equivalent in other countries. And they've already given away $9 billion in free advertising. Most nonprofits really do qualify. You can't be a school, a government institution, or a hospital. But almost all nonprofits can fit into this, can qualify for it. And with proper management, can see a lot of really great results. So how do we take advantage of that program, and how do we think about digital marketing as a whole? I started my business focused specifically on this type of product, about the Google Ad Grant, because it is a great way to jumpstart your organization. And so I want to look a little bit at the different places we can address, different places we can engage with our audience along the way, and move forward with also how to pull in different types of digital marketing into that process. So if we go over to our next slide, I have this label as what the ad grant help do to help you achieve your organizational goals. But this is digital marketing as a whole. But we do want to dive specifically into ad grant and search as well. So what can we do with this? Can we educate and engage? Absolutely. We can get people that are searching for something to get to the website, to watch a video, to then go to your social media and become part of that ecosystem, right? We can also focus in and get leads in the first place. Now, leads is not a term that most nonprofits think about. It is normally a business term, but leads for nonprofits are not necessarily someone signing up to get a service. A lead can just be a volunteer sign up. It can be someone coming to one of your events. It can be getting into your newsletter so that 6 months from now they get enough information and care enough about what you're doing that they donate. All of these things can be leads. I encourage you to think about that in a little bit more business format, to think about those leads. But we can also drive direct action. We can go after those people and respond to that intent that I was talking about earlier to get them to donate. You can respond to the moment that they're asking that question and get them the final answer that they need. The next step in the process for some of these people, some of these constituents that you want to reach out to, is actually to do that final step of donating, becoming a long-term donor, to enroll in a program. There's a lot of steps to this, but I want to give us some concrete examples of how we actually can respond to this. So if we go to the next slide, let's break this down a little bit different way, right? So if we're in that earlier stage, sort of to put in more marketing speak, top of the funnel, if we're trying to educate and engage, it could be a really broad search. So someone looking for a humanitarian crisis in Syria, they know about a topic, but they don't know what they want to do about it. They don't know who they want to talk to. There are lots of different things that could answer this question. And for you, it's trying to show up and be who they're going to trust in the future. Now, if we're looking a little bit further in the funnel, if we're trying to generate a lead to get the newsletter subscription, to get a volunteer, to get someone to make some stronger engagement, they're looking for something a little bit different. They're looking for how they can do some sort of support. They already know about the problem. They've researched it to one extent or another, and they're looking for what's next. What do I do? What are the nonprofits that deal with this issue? In my example from here, how to support a Syrian refugee, find Syrian refugee nonprofit. They've gone beyond the education stage. They know about the problem. They just don't know how to help, right? And this can be expanded to any type of nonprofit, this thought process. And always think about this whenever you're doing any digital campaign. What part of the process am I trying to engage with? Am I trying to educate people in the first place that don't know something exists? Do I want them to be a part of my organization, or are they already ready to give? So this is that final step. These are searches that they already know who they want to give to, and you want to make sure you get them to the right place, to the right call to action. They know what they're trying to support and how they want to do it. They want to donate to a Syrian refugee. That makes sense for this person. They just need the right organization to show up and have the right call to action for them. So looking at finding audiences, targeting them, and getting them to that next step is a bigger funnel. Again, use those marketing terms. Now, if we go to our next slide, this is one of my, this takes a few clicks as well, Morgan. This is one of my favorites. If you were going to screenshot one thing today from my portion of the conversation, I would encourage this to be it. It really demonstrates the ecosystem. As I said before, print mail, not dead. Print advertising is not dead. It just needs to be part of the conversation and be a part of the overall ecosystem. So you can think of this as a layered approach. What are you trying to do right now? Are you trying to create awareness for something? Maybe you're using the ad grant. Maybe you're using PR. Maybe you're using videos in that world. Maybe you're trying to make them move down that funnel just a little bit further to engage them in your social media ecosystem. Maybe you need to get them to an event so they can see the issue you're addressing in closer proximity. Maybe they've attended that event. Maybe they've talked to you. They're already a lead. You've already engaged them with your newsletter, and it's time to make a direct appeal with direct mail or email, remarket them in some way through Google or otherwise, and retarget those people to get them back in to wherever you really need their support. So I always come back to this slide, this thought process, as this overall ecosystem that allows you to visualize at a glance who you're trying to target, who you're trying to engage with, and what works best with that stage of the process, and what kind of language you should be thinking about for that audience. I want to give you guys a quick case study with our next slide of an organization that I think has done a really great job of this. If you're not familiar with Samaritans, they are a volunteer-run entirely nonprofit that is a suicide prevention hotline. All of their hotline answerers are trained, but they're volunteers, and so that's the number one most important thing to them. They have to engage with those volunteers long term. They have to keep them on board, but they have to find people that are willing to sign up to do this in the first place. Now, they had already been using the ad grant, and they made that step. They identified that it's time to augment that. We need to go to that next step beyond the education and engagement and add another piece of that marketing ecosystem that we looked at in the last slide of adding a paid ad account to that strategy. And within a year, they saw a 10% increase in donations and 1,700 new volunteers. And with volunteers being the main part of the organization, that's incredibly impactful to me. Next, I'd like to talk through what I think of as the 5 keys to success. Now, these are things that I want you to think about before you try to apply any digital campaign, any opportunity that you're trying to go after. If you're trying to promote an event, if you're trying to create a new volunteer program, whatever digital platform or process you're trying to engage, think about these steps first. Then we can go to our first slide within this section. Excellent. So the first thing you need to do is define what success looks like. So if you don't understand who your audience that you're trying to reach is and what success looks like with that audience, how that successful digital impact or campaign is going to be measured with organizational goals. Are you getting people to site? What does that mean? Are you getting people to sign up for a newsletter? What does that mean? What is the value of getting someone to an event and having a clear guideline of what you're trying to accomplish? The rest of the steps won't matter because you're not going to continue, you're not going to follow through if you don't know what success looks like. Now, if we go on to our next slide, I want you to think about sharing your story. Now, this is, it may sound a little cliche. Every site, every touch point, you should already be sharing your story. What is the mission of your nonprofit? What are you trying to accomplish, and what do you want people to take away from it? But if it's not tied together, if you're inconsistent, you will not have the same level of impact as you will if you tie things together, right? So if we're looking at this, there's a lot of different steps. You need your calls to action, you need your content, you need to be clear in who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. If you can tie all those things together on a single page, you're off to a really good start. But it also needs to be accessible to all people. If we go to our next slide, I have a good example of this. Right? If you have those call to action, the content, and all of that together on a single page, or on a single social media channel, or on a single email, it doesn't matter if it doesn't match the rest of your organization, and it needs to be actually mobile friendly. And this is not simply that we are in a digital world and you need to keep up, but a huge portion of our audience, of our constituents worldwide, are on mobile, and they need that access point to be consistent between those different points. If they're on their home on their desktop, it needs to work and feel the same as when they're on their phone, when on their tablet, and every experience that they want to go through. Next, I want to go ahead and talk about investing the time and resources. Now, you can have all those other steps ready. You can have what success looks like. You can have all of your messaging lined up. But if you're not willing to invest internally, have a dedicated owner, someone that is going to be responsible for making it all tie together and work long term, it's not going to work long term. You might get initial success. You may get some new donors, some new volunteers, but it's not going to continue to grow. So I would encourage you to actually take the time internally, build the structure, tell your story, tie it together, and then launch it after all of that is agreed on. And if you don't have someone internally that can handle all of that, look internally or externally for someone that can. Cause Inspired is one of any agencies that Google has defined as a certified professional agency. We piloted a program with them where there are now 40 agencies worldwide that they say are valuable and useful to work with nonprofits for the ad grant specifically, and also for other digital marketing. And whether you want to work with us or not, this is the place you should go to look. If you don't have that dedicated owner internally, you need that at some level. And if we go on to our next slide, once you have your structure, once you're ready, once you have your defined goals, you need to track it. One of the core differences between digital marketing and traditional marketing is the trackability. And that does not mean you have to pay for $100,000 a year tracking software. It doesn't mean you have to pay for tracking at all. There's a lot of free tools, but you need to have them implemented correctly. You can use Google Analytics, free. Google Tag Manager, free. All of these things can be used to identify when someone's actually signing up for a newsletter, when someone's actually downloading something, donating something, signing up as a volunteer. All of these factors need to be tracked so that you can actually go back to that initial defined goals that you started with and identify if you're actually making that impact. Without that, without tying that in, you can't make things work better than the first time you try something. Because all you know is that you showed ads, you started a new campaign, but what happened? You need to measure all of that. And it really is not that difficult to set up. Again, if you have someone internally, get them to do it. If you do not, it's absolutely worth hiring someone to help you with that. And finally, our fifth key to success is embracing technology. And I can't stress this enough that it's not simply using digital platforms. It's not simply saying, all right, well, we're going to pay to remote post on Facebook. We're going to get the ad grant. Within all of these platforms, over the past 5 years, but 3 years especially, almost everything has moved to AI or automation. There's a lot of different terms for it. Smart campaigns. All of these things rely on signals. So the step before this about measuring what matters comes into play here. If you have tracked whether someone has signed up, whether they have come back, whether you're getting a donation from this ad or not, is going to influence whether that automation actually has real data to go off of. And it is night and day between when you have a new campaign that you're just starting out with, you're trying to get data, and when this automation can take over. Once you have that and you have essentially Google or Facebook or whatever platform you're looking at, AI trained for your audience, your results are exponential. So think about this. Make sure when you're committing to a new campaign that you commit fully, and make sure that you actually embrace all the technology and have that owner responsible for it. And that is my section for today. Morgan, if you want to jump in, or if we, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm definitely excited to kind of build on what you just talked about, kind of the next step once you get people's attention. So we're going to talk about engagement tools, things that you're probably already using to engage the people once you get them in the door. And then we're going to talk about MilkCrate and how it can be a kind of step up in that process, and a tool that can help you do that even better and track it. We're going to go over some case studies of MilkCrate app users. And then when does an app like MilkCrate make sense and not? Because it's really, really important to not get attracted to something shiny just because it's shiny, and it might not actually solve a problem. So we want to make sure that The way that we talk about this is geared towards solving problems with the right tools. And, I think that's where we'll end. So defining digital engagement, this is something that kind of has already been touched on a bunch, but just that there are these steps in the process of like first identifying who are you trying to talk to, getting them aware of what you want them to be aware of through a blog, an ad, a website, getting some sort of reactive engagement from them, like a follow, a like, or a comment, having that eventually turn into taking some more real action, like attending something, learning something, acting, or donating, and then having all of that then produce real measurable change in society. And so we are definitely kind of, as you can see this whole presentation, there's kind of cause-inspired media is kind of helping with the first couple of steps, and then MilkCrate's kind of about the last couple of steps. And again, it's really important to kind of define your audience and who you're talking to. What MilkCrate really focuses on is helping nonprofits engage and track participation with volunteers, participants, and members. There are so many tools out there focused on donor engagement and cultivation, but often these other groups get kind of left behind because they aren't as directly connected to the finances of the organization and much more so about the impact of the organization. And that's what we're really focused on. We're helping nonprofits help grow their impact through improving their engagement and tracking of their volunteers, participants, and members. Now, I did add this little slide because we've had this idea of how MilkCrate apps could potentially fit into a Google ad program that you could set up with cause-inspired media. For example, if you were to advertise your app as a thing that you've launched for your volunteers or for your program participants, there's a chance to potentially monetize that through sponsorship and as a way to get more users. And so this is something that we would love to partner with cause-inspired media on, is to have a nonprofit that launches a MilkCrate app and a Google ad campaign and brings the two together to make it even more impactful. So if that kind of tickles anyone's interest, feel free to indicate that on the survey that we're going to send you afterwards, or send us an email. We'd love to talk to you about that. And I think maybe it'll make a little bit more sense once I explain a bit more about what MilkCrate is and how our apps and our platform work. But before we do that, I just wanted to give you guys a chance to share in the chat who here is currently running a program, whether it's for volunteers, beneficiaries, members, at a nonprofit, and you wish engagement and progress tracking was easier. And again, this is the stage that comes after you got them in the door. We get them in the door with the Google ads and the website. Once you get that volunteer in the door, how are you communicating with them about the shifts that they can sign up for, or the training materials, or getting feedback from them about how it went with the person that they were working with as their volunteer work? Or how are you tracking that beneficiary and making sure they have the resources they need to improve their lives and answer questions about how they're doing? So who here is running a program like that and having those kinds of challenges? Feel free to add that in the chat. I don't hear any dinging, so I'm guessing no one's doing it yet, but feel free to do that later. My guess is that for those of you who are running something like this, you're probably using some combination of these analog and digital tools. We've got all the analog ones up at the top in blue and the digital ones down at the bottom. And some of these cost a lot of money. Almost all of them take a lot of time to manage. And when you've got a bunch of them going, it can be really laborious to kind of keep it all together and try and track it. And that can take a lot of staff time. And so something that we've identified is that when you're trying to get people engaged, share content, facilitate communication, and track, a mobile app can actually be a really powerful way to do it. The problem is it's usually been very, very expensive to do it. So which of these tools are you currently using? How well is it serving your needs? Maybe how much is it costing you? These are all important questions that, again, you don't have to put them into the chat, but I think it's important to kind of take a mental inventory of like, okay, how much of this stuff am I using? How much time is it taking me? And how much is it costing me? And these are the kind of questions we typically ask nonprofits when we do a discovery call with them one-on-one to help them kind of figure out if MilkCrate could be helpful for them, because it's often the case where you're using a lot of tools, they're taking a lot of time, they might even be costing you a lot of money to purchase them, or at least the staff time is expensive. And so those are the kind of things we want to look for and hopefully fix. And the way that we do that is, so the MilkCrate platform comes with a mobile app for each nonprofit that they can brand and tailor to their needs, along with the analytics and management back-end platform where they can see what's happening in their app, add new content, track it, etc. We make it so that you can launch your nonprofit program app for your audience, your members, your volunteers, your program participants or beneficiaries. You can choose from ready-to-go features that match your needs for engagement and tracking. So you don't have to build this from scratch. You don't have to design it. It doesn't have to take a long time and a lot of money because it's already ready to go. And then you have a system where you can manage your users, manage your content, and generate reports to see what's happening. So you can track how well is it going, what might we need to change, what can we do next, all of that good thing, those good things. This is kind of a condensed version of that first slide. So again, cause-inspired media is helping you guys in the enlist phase, getting people in the door, getting them in the door as a donor, as a volunteer, as a member, as a participant. MilkCrate is all about engaging them once you have them in the door. So instead of that paper sign-in sheet or that newsletter or the social media group that you try and manage or the phone calls and the texting, how do we make it easier to do that with a mobile app that reaches everybody? And then evaluating them, being able to see because they're engaging through their phone and there's a user account, you can track that as digital data on a dashboard that you can aggregate and generate reports with everybody else in the program. And then there's another phase that we talk about in some of our other webinars. Now, this is a quote that we got from one of our clients during this whole quarantine time, because we've seen now more than ever, digital engagement is so important, especially when you're running a program that can no longer operate completely or at all in the real world in person, which is the case for a lot of nonprofits. And so we were really happy when we heard from him that they were so happy that they already had something in place that was digital, so that when they had to go fully digital, it was a much more painless experience. But that doesn't mean we can't solve the problem now. So I just wanted to put that out there as something that we were really happy to be able to help this organization more seamlessly transition to a fully digital platform for their program. Now, the way it works typically for a nonprofit is they're telling their users, whether again they're volunteers or participants, hey, we're launching a mobile app. It's our brand. It's called, this name that you would expect it to be called. Go in the App Store and download it. Then you create your profile. Maybe you join a team that's based on your zip code or your school or your role in the organization. And after filling out your demographic information for your profile and picking your team, you're now brought into the main part of the app that you can start earning points for signing up for a volunteer shift or accessing resources and materials or filling out a survey or a poll question or chatting with a coach or a mentee, watching a video, all of these kinds of things that can be gamified and you can earn points for and are tracked both for the user in their profile as well as on the back end for the staff to manage and monitor. I started to mention some of the templated features that can be really helpful for engaging program participants: an events calendar or a volunteer shift calendar, push notifications where you can send an alert reminding people like, we need someone tomorrow to do this, or a reminder that by Friday, everyone has to have watched X and made their comments in the app. Having physical GPS check-in on a directory or a map where you can see all the different places you might need people to go, like parks or health centers or libraries or museums, and then having them physically check in and the GPS of the phone verifying it. Polls and surveys are obviously really valuable. We already talked about segmenting your users and then being able to share content directly with your users and track their absorption of that content. We're also adding badges and levels so that there can be a kind of tiered progress tracking as well over time. So I'm curious if anyone wants to share any engagement or tracking problems maybe you've had, particularly maybe while working remotely or while your programs are running remotely with your members, volunteers, students, beneficiaries, the groups that you're serving. Does anyone have anything like that? Okay, well, we'll assume some of you do, and you're just being quiet. A case study that kind of represents one of these challenges. There's an organization here in Philadelphia called the Committee of 70. David Thornburg, their executive director, has helped create something called the We Vote program. And We Vote is a way for different organizations to sign their employees up to be more civically engaged and to learn about voting and ways that they can help make the city better. However, it used to operate in this very ethereal offline with some email context, and there was just a very simple landing page, and that was about it. Now, all of the content and activities and events live in the WeVote app, and all of the different organizations that have their employees participating have their own team. So it's easy to share the content, it's easy to communicate, and it's easy to track, which was really an exciting, win across the board for them. In terms of the actual output data, so the output that they were looking for was that there were 450 instances of voters viewing the guide in the last election cycle. And the actual outcome, the measurable change over time, was that their app users were 50% more likely to vote after downloading the app at least 1 week before the election. And so, they were able to solve kind of inherent problems in their engagement and their tracking, and they were able to actually track an achievable impact in the cause that organization is funded to make change in the world. So very excited about that. I think just for the sake of time, I'm going to skip ahead to, okay, who is wondering what the accessibility of mobile is to different demographic audiences? Often people are like, well, not everyone's going to go to my website, or not everyone's going to use my app, or not everyone's going to go to my Facebook page. And you're right, there isn't a magic bullet. However, there's some really powerful data around from Pew around mobile, specifically that Americans of all ages are increasingly likely to say that they mostly go online using their smartphone. And if you look at the graph on the right, you'll see that across all demographics, the vast majority of adults have a smartphone, which is, I think, often news to a lot of people, that despite income level, education, age, geography, all these race, all these different things, that most people have a smartphone now and are using it. And it's often the main way that they're accessing the internet. A few more case studies. This is an amazing organization. The Free Library is part of a coalition called Read by Fourth that runs a reading captain initiative where volunteers go door to door helping families make sure they know how to get their kids on grade reading level by the 4th grade. And originally, the volunteers used to have to carry around a 4-inch binder with all the age-related materials to share with families. Now they have all of those resources in the palm of their hand, and their work gets directly tracked in the app so that Jenny and the other staff can see what their volunteers are doing on the ground, and eventually use that data to inform what are the reading score changes looking like, and might that have something to do with the volunteer work that's happening. One last example is the STAMP program, where teens got free access to museums, and they never knew if the kids were actually going because they were using a paper ID card that basically never got tracked. Now the kids could check in on their phones at the museums that they were going to, and it instantly showed up on a dashboard which teens were going to which museums and which ones were more popular with different types of teens. So that was a really exciting case study that had over 6,500 teens using it at once. So the final section is just helping you all kind of put this all into context. So we've talked about the nonprofit program lifecycle, where you start with getting people in the door with tools like Google Ads and websites. Once you get them in the door, how do you engage them? You're probably already using some things like newsletters and social media, phone calls and texting that can take a lot of effort and don't always reach everyone. And then we've talked about how a MilkCrate app can be a really powerful tool specifically for volunteers, program participants, and beneficiaries. But when does it make sense to launch a mobile app? Now, we know most people have smartphones, but that doesn't mean you should just build an app. So these are some of the criteria that we look for in our nonprofits that we're talking to see if we're a good fit, because we only want to build apps if it's going to be a good fit. So the goal has to be to better engage the program participants and track data. It can't just be, well, we want an app or apps are cool. There has to be that aligned desire to achieve what our product can help you achieve. There has to be a value to the end user. So you can't just say, well, I want everyone to download this app and do stuff in it, and there's no real incentive for them to do it. It has to make it easier for those volunteers or other groups to do something that they're already doing or wanted to do, and make it easier for them, more interesting, more rewarding. Things like making it easier to consume content, communicate, or complete activities are examples. Some additional things that you can do are gamification or visual progress tracking that can help people feel like a sense of progress. So that can be a really powerful incentive as well. The staff have to see this as something that's going to make their jobs easier in order to be invested in using it successfully. And often there has to be a value to the funders. They have to want to see like, oh, what's the data look like? Is it working? Are we making this organization more efficient? How are we helping grow capacity? Those are all things that MilkCrate can help do. And if they value that, then they'll be more invested in its success as well, and maybe even help fund it. To simplify this as easily as possible, if you need a consistent engagement and behavior data, it's often a good bet that a mobile app makes sense. But if you don't, then there are other solutions like websites and other tools that might be a better fit for what you're trying to achieve. And we can kind of help you figure that out if we wind up doing a discovery call and kind of having a deeper conversation. Finally, if those of you have ever explored a mobile app and thought, oh my goodness, this is going to be so expensive, we have to build it from scratch, we have to learn how to design it, it's going to take so much time, who's going to manage it? Those are all really important concerns, and that's why we basically created this product, because it needs to be affordable, easy, and fast for a nonprofit to want to implement it. And so we're basically the first and best way for a nonprofit to launch an affordable mobile app that's focused on engagement and tracking, because we've built a system with templates to make it affordable, because we're not building it from scratch and we're not having to do everything from the beginning. And so we're able to kind of learn from the past and build upon that. So lots of different nonprofits have benefited from this strategy in lots of different causes and areas. It's not one size fits all, but it definitely fits a lot of situations. So that's the kind of bulk of the presentation. Before we get into Q&A, I want to make sure that we have one important piece of housekeeping. I always get emails from people afterwards saying, oh my goodness, you shared so much. I need the slides, or I want the recording. And I'm like, okay, absolutely. Please fill out my survey first. So I'm going to just paste this in here. And that is a link to this survey. And it's really short. I just need you all to take a minute now or later to fill it out. And once you fill it out, I will happily send you the recordings and the slides. Or if you don't want the recordings and slides, that's fine. But please fill it out anyways, because we'd love to hear from you and learn from you. So now we've got 13 minutes. I almost got it done on time for Q&A. Please feel free to just come off mute and share your questions with us. Also, feel free to turn your video on. We'd love to see your faces if that works for you. And I also am seeing a bunch of questions in here, which is great. So Charlie said, in regard to the last question you mentioned, it can sometimes be difficult to measure how active volunteers are or how previous donors are contributing. To the nonprofits we work with. Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things, like we just launched an app that's very COVID related for an organization called Jersey Cares, where volunteers need to basically claim a senior that they're going to go help grocery shop for and deliver the groceries. And so they had like no way of tracking this beforehand. They were getting hundreds and hundreds of requests. And now all of that work is, all of those opportunities for seniors to help are in an app. And then every volunteer has their own user account, and they can basically go and claim the work that they're going to do. They can take pictures of the groceries that they deliver. They can physically check in at the senior's home, so it proves that they were there. And then all of that activity for that volunteer shows up on the MilkCrate dashboard, where you can see, like, you know, Charlie Dunn, volunteer extraordinaire, has done these 10 drop-offs of groceries this week. And that's, you know, one of the ways that we can help solve that kind of problem. Oscar said, are there integrations to CRM programs linking donor and volunteer information? Yeah, so we absolutely have an option for adding that to the work that we do for our clients, where we can tie your volunteer ID profile with, like, say, a CRM, like Salesforce user ID, so that you can kind of see that connecting. One other question it looks like I've got: most times the programs were one-offs that ranged a variety of causes that may not share common interests. We just survey after and keep them on a list for future volunteer engagement. Yeah, I mean, if it's just a short, like 1-day experience or something like that, or a weekend, that definitely doesn't make sense for a mobile app for sure. We really only build apps for organizations that are running a program that has like a long engagement cycle, where it's like, this week we want you to do that, and next week we want you to do these 3 things, and then take this survey, and how's it going, and chat with this person. Like, there's a lot of touch points and activity to manage and support, and that's when we make a lot more sense. But yeah, that's a really good point, that not needed for the short-term tiny things. Manage young professionals volunteer group. Oh, cool. Yeah, we actually have 2 clients that are young adult volunteer organizations, and they used to communicate through email and social. If you check out the case study on our website, it's the Youth Volunteer Corps. And it's been amazing working with them and seeing how their program has evolved, especially actually because of coronavirus. They have had to move all their volunteer opportunities to digital experiences. And so now the teens open up their app and they're like, oh, I can write an e-card to this patient, or I can do an audit of plastic in my home and take pictures of what I found. So there's all these other things that they've kind of transitioned their app to do to make it stay engaging and relevant as the world becomes weirder and weirder. Anybody have anything else? I think I just got through all the questions. That's great. We struggled doing virtual volunteer activities. Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, I think I would love to talk to you afterwards, and I'll definitely reach out. I think the Youth Volunteer Corps is a perfect case study for what you guys are doing, and might help inspire some ideas of how we could help. And I forgot to mention, we will be following up with everyone that registered and attended, sending you guys an email from me, and it'll have the link to the survey in it as well, and then copying someone from my team to say like, hey, like, if you think we can be helpful, let us know. We'd love to set up a call. We can kind of help go through this more in depth, particularly the when does it make sense and when does it not for different organizations, and help you guys kind of figure out if we're a good fit. And I know Sean and Charlie would love to, be able to do the same if you guys are interested in working with them. I mean, who doesn't want $10,000 of free advertising a month? Like, pretty good deal. Absolutely, Charlie. You can even do it on audio.
Sorry, I have a question in regard to the template layouts.
Mm-hmm.
Is the template layouts built through the actual nonprofit, or the person at the nonprofit, that they can complete questionnaires or maybe assign tasks specific to their organization, or do they reach out through MilkCrate to have those templates designed? Or I'm just kind of asking usability.
Yeah. So high level, basically, like the MilkCrate platform launches an app for each nonprofit. And then that app has its brand in the app stores. And then that app is managed by the backend system. And all of our clients log into the same system, but with their own ID, which unlocks their experience with their features and their content and their users. So let's say Youth Volunteer Corps of Philadelphia has a new volunteer opportunity they want to list in their app. They would log in with their admin, list that opportunity, their users would see it. And then the Youth Volunteer Corps of Hampton Roads, which is another one of our clients that the other one referred us to, yay. They have their own stuff, they log in, they add it, their users see it. So it's completely separate experiences that the admins, anyone who has admin access, can go and change. So, and you can have as many admins as you want creating that content. When I use the word template, I kind of mean like the events calendar is a template, and each client gets their own events calendar, but it's the same code, which is why it can be 1/10 of the cost of building it from scratch, because we already built the calendar. Why would we build it all over again?
Similar to if you're building a WordPress site,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can just add in the plugin for a calendar. You can just add in the plugin for a pop-up and just make it look like your brand.
Exactly. And yeah, I say Squarespace, Wix, WordPress all the time as like examples of kind of how MilkCrate is the mobile app version of that kind of a product and business model, and the kind of pain point we're trying to solve, which is making really like beautiful, effective technology affordable for a sector that has not really been served well in that department.
Absolutely.
Any other questions that people want to chat, type, or verbally share? While you're all thinking about it, feel free to go to the survey right now and fill that out, because we all know that we're going to hop on our next Zoom right after this and get distracted, and we'd really appreciate your feedback. So I'm going to just put it in here one more time. Oh, we've got another question. I was a little late to the party. I get a strong just of how the MilkCrate manages app. My question is, MilkCrate have a criteria for organizations? Yes. Well, we have criteria that's basically like, can we help you enough? That's our criteria. And we actually have a page on our website that is milkcrate.tech/criteria, where we ask some questions and give some examples of like, if you're having these problems or asking these questions, then we're a good fit. And if not, maybe we're not. As far as like we don't care about your tax ID status. You don't have to be a nonprofit for us to work with you. We work with an amazing organization here in Philadelphia that's technically a for-profit called Q Spaces. They have a directory of LGBT-friendly medical providers that directory is launched in a MilkCrate app. It's called Q Spaces, and like we support that and love that, but they're not a nonprofit. So we don't care your tax ID status. We just care that you're making the world a better place and we can help you. Yeah. So again, we're going to send out an email to everybody. It'll have the survey in there. Please take it. If you have any questions or want to follow up before we get a chance to reach out to you, feel free to do that as well. I'm going to just put my email in the chat right now, so you can do that. Sean, Charlie, if you'd like to do the same, feel free. And we've got 3 minutes left. So if anyone wants to hang on and has any more questions, feel free. And I'm going to go reward myself with a popsicle because I didn't turn the air conditioning on. And it's hot and chilly.
Popsicles are always a good option.
Yes, I got that years ago. I got that little IKEA popsicle set. And now I feel like somewhere between a small child and like a gourmet chef that I make my own popsicles.
Absolutely.
Oh, thanks, Oscar. Glad I remembered to hit the record button at the beginning. It did feel like a good one. Thanks, Carrie. Are the rest of you thinking of questions or just left the room? I have no idea that we're done.
Could be both.
A little bit of both. Well, that was great.
Yeah, pretty well.
Thanks, Charlie. All right, and I'm going to stop recording somehow.
Somehow.
There we go.